Meeting to order at 10:01 a.m. I ask that as a courtesy to all that you ensure that you have silenced your cell phones. Also, I would like to remind our directors to turn their microphone on each time they speak to help with the audio and video recordings. For the record, I'll note that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law, and the notice of this board meeting was provided to each of the directors. At this time, I would like to ask Director Huber to deliver the invocation.
Pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you are our God, that you are sovereign, that nothing happens without your allowing it, and we take great comfort in that. We thank you for this organization that we're a part of, the privilege of being on this board and serving the people of Texas in this capacity. We thank you for the staff and management here of this excellent agency and all the hard work they do. We ask you to give us wisdom now today as we make decisions for this organization. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Director Mike Fernandez indicated that he would not be present for today's meeting. We've now reached the portion of the meeting where we have set aside time to hear from you, the general public. Those interested in providing comments by filling out one of the cards available at the receptionist desk will be called to approach the podium to make their comments. At this time, we have John Asbury. Good morning. Mr. Asbury, you'll have 3 minutes, and we'll start the time as soon as you begin speaking.
They're not enough. Yeah. Hello, I'm John Asbury from Temple, Texas. I'm here to discuss about item 10, the Belton Stillhouse water transfer at this point. In Bell County, we have several questions about this whole project. But in particular, the one question is why do we need to have a new water intake facility built when there's one down maybe 2 miles away already with the West Bell County Water District? It seems to us that you could save a lot of money, just work with the water district and with some money enhance that intake facility, and both could use it. The previous early plans had one of the options to go there at that point and see. So for $90 million you're getting ready to spend on this thing, this could probably be a chunk of change that could be used more wisely. But anyway, like I say, why 2 intake facilities less than 2 miles apart just for this thing? The second part about this is even though we're going to go from Belton to Stillhouse, Georgetown to Williamson, Georgetown County, there are already plans in place for purchasing water from the Corridos-Wilcox Aquifer by Williamson County and Georgetown. And at this point, it's going to be purchased over east of the river, Brazos River, and the Brazos groundwater district. And so they're going to put a pipeline from there over through Milam County and probably up to Lake Granger at that point. So this facility, what we're doing with Belton, is not going to be enough to satisfy their needs. And there's a lot more water where they're taking it out the Brazos River. They have access to the Little River. They have access to San Gabriel as far as getting water at this point. If you read some of your material, they're even talking about taking water from Lake Whitney, bringing it down, and putting it in an ASR project in Lake Granger at that point. What they really need is a very, very large ASR project over the Corridos Aquifer down east of Georgetown, Williamson County, so that they can store the water there that they can use from various different sources at this point. That you wouldn't even have to have the Belton Stillhouse thing. But you need to look for large amounts of water for Williamson Bell County. The Belton thing is not going to come near satisfying it. So you need to look at better resources at this point. I have material that you can read about that at this point. But you may need to do a little more planning before you make these final decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any more So, seeing that no one else wishes to speak, we will move on. David Collingsworth has an announcement.
Well, good morning, members of the board. Happy Monday. A couple of announcements real quick. I wanted to let the board know that this will be the last board meeting for our HR manager, Monica Wheelis. Monica spent 20 years with the BRA, and instead of going into a long, drawn-out list of all of her accomplishments, I can tell you that each and every employee of the BRA is better off because of Monica's hard work and service and all that she's done for the organization. So her and her husband are retiring and going to live an easier life, and we're just so thankful that we became your friend and got to work with you, Monica. So thank you very much. Now, as any great manager is supposed to do, they're supposed to prepare and ready their replacement. And Monica did that also. So sitting next to Monica is her replacement, Crystal Wilde. And Crystal's been with us for many years. She's come up through the HR field, finished her bachelor's, has her master's, and has just done an outstanding job. And just to each person on the management team, when I talked to them about this transition, it was just a go. And Crystal's going to do a great job for us, and she is 100% BRA. So we're glad to have her as Monica's replacement. And then also at the BRA, from time to time, we have to hire some really unique positions. And one of those would be reservoir manager. It's really hard to find people that have dedicated their career to managing reservoirs. We were actually able to steal one from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So Dylan Mayfield is here. Dylan, would you stand up? I wanted Dylan to stand up so everybody that's watching on YouTube could know who to call and complain to about all the issues around Lake Granbury. Dylan came from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He spent a lot of time at different lakes, including Lake Louisville, which is one of the most crowded, highly trafficked lakes on holiday weekends, and his thought process and his experiences are going to serve the BRA very well. Welcome, Dylan. And that's all I have.
Right. Well, welcome to our new team members, and Monica, thank you for all that you have done. We appreciate you, and best wishes for your retirement. Moving to the first agenda item, discussion and possible action on fiscal year 2024 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, ACFR, by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Board. As I said to the Admin and Audit Committee just a moment ago, the poet Robert Burns said, "The best laid plans of mice and men go oft awry." And this morning we have a little bit of awry, where Aaron Worthman, our principal auditor, has the flu and is not able to join us today. So in his stead, we have gotten Sarah Slaughter, who is our audit director. She's second in command on the audit, has sent us a video where she's walking through the presentation. So we're going to show that to you after I'm done with my presentation. And so to go right ahead, like I said, we presented this to the Admin and Audit Committee prior to this, so I don't know if Director Embro had any comments he would like to make.
Yeah, Michelle, I want to take this time to commend you and your staff for the transparency in working with Baker Tilly to ensure that our reports are in order. And you guys did a great job this morning presenting that. So I want to just take this time to recognize the hard work you guys are doing.
Thank you. And it is a really group effort, and so I would like to recognize the recently retired Matt Wheelis and the entire F&A department, also the folks in our Public Information Office, who I say put together the interesting, fun part of the ACFR. This year they focused on our Environmental Services Division, not just our field ops, but also our lab staff, and it's really interesting if you get a chance to read it. And I also want to take this opportunity to introduce Susan Alamond. She is our new controller, taking Matt's place. She started with us on December 1st. She has hit the ground running, and she's doing a fantastic job. So at the end of this presentation, what we want to do is give you a level of confidence in our audit and in our annual comprehensive financial report, to allow you, to give you a level of comfort in approving that, so that we can file that document with the TCEQ and the Water Development Board and the other entities that we share that with. So, and, okay, different button. So the purpose of the annual financial report is to give our board directors, our customers, our stakeholders, and other interested parties with reliable financial information about the BRA in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. The ACFR is a historical document. It's presenting the actual results for our prior fiscal year, which ended August 31st, 2024. It differs from our annual operating plan, our budget, which is a prospective document. That's the financial plan for the upcoming fiscal year. The budget differs from the ACFR in several ways. Probably two of the biggest ones are depreciation is not included as an expense in the budget, but it is in the financial report. And in the budget, our debt service principal payments and our capital asset purchases are recorded as expenses, but they're adjusted on the balance sheet in the annual financial report. The annual financial report has 3 sections. The introductory section, which includes some general information about the BRA, our transmittal letter, and our GFOA award. And I want to point out that BRA has received the GFOA award for excellence in financial reporting for 38 consecutive years. And we hope that when we submit this one after you approve it, that we'll have 39th. The next section is the financial section. It has the auditor's report, the required supplemental information, the basic financial statements, and the notes to the supplemental information. This is all the information that is audited by the auditors. The third section, the statistical section, includes a lot of comparative data, a lot of statistical information that helps our end users and people who look at the ACFR to understand kind of who we are. This information is unaudited, but the auditors do review it. It includes our debt information, major customers, schedule of insurance, some other information there. This is Baker Tilly's 6th year to do our audit. They spend anywhere from 300 to 400 hours. This year they did the audit totally virtually. They were not on site. We were able to do everything by using a shared file, and that's worked out very well for everyone. So next we'll move on to the video from Sarah Slaughter.
I would just add that all of this with the video and Andrew not being able to be here all shook down yesterday afternoon. So that was the notice that we received.
Whoops, that's my part. There we go.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Slaughter, a director at Baker Tilly and the Brazos River Authority Audit Manager. I'm pleased to be with you today to present the audit results for your fiscal year 24 financial audit. As part of the financial packet, you should have received the audit results letter. This presentation is designed to highlight key points from the audit results letter, and I urge you to review the letter for more detail. In this presentation, I will provide a brief overview of your audit process and results, go over required communication that we as auditors are required to provide to the governing body, and provide a brief overview of upcoming accounting changes that could potentially impact Brazos. Our audit was completed and issued on December 20th. The final fieldwork occurred remotely late October through early November, with reporting and wrap-up done through our issuance date. Management and staff were cooperative and readily available, and we encountered no difficulties as part of this year's audit. There were no new accounting standards effective for fiscal '24, and the only significant item we had to plan for this year was the upgrade of the accounting system. Our audit process begins with the planning phase, where we obtain information through discussion with management and staff, review key financial business processes, and test controls using statistical sampling. We then evaluate results and perform risk assessment to develop appropriate audit procedures to address any risks identified during the planning phase. During final fieldwork, we substantially test key areas by using independent confirmations, obtaining and reviewing specialist reports, and trace information to source documents such as invoices. During our preliminary fieldwork, we review and test key controls of significant cycles. The results of the test of controls determines our procedures over these key areas during final fieldwork. The key financial transaction we review and test as part of the audit are disbursements, payroll, billing and revenue, cash and investments, capital assets, debt transactions, and information technology controls. The audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. The audit objective is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement and present fairly in all material respect in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. As a result of our audit, Brazos received an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we can provide as auditors. As mentioned before, we considered internal control over financial reporting as a basis for designing our audit procedures for the sole purpose of expressing an opinion on the financial statements. We do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control. Our procedures were not designed to identify all deficiencies in internal controls that might be material weakness or significant deficiency. Therefore, material weaknesses or significant deficiencies may exist that were not identified. We did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be a material weakness. The auditor's responsibility to plan and perform the audit, inform and express an opinion, does not relieve management or the board of their responsibilities. We are not aware of any relationship between Baker Tilly and Brazos that, in our professional judgment, may reasonably impair our independence. As part of the audit, we evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies used and the reasonableness of significant accounting estimates made by management. The significant accounting policies are described in Note 1 to the financial statements. No new accounting policies were adopted, and the application of existing accounting policies was not changed during fiscal year '24. Accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements and are based on management's knowledge and experience about past and current events and assumptions about future events. Certain accounting estimates are particularly sensitive because of the significance to the statements, the degree of subjectivity involved in their development, and because of the possibility that future events affecting them may differ significantly from those expected. The estimates most significant to the financial statements are the net pension liability, accrued compensated absences, and depreciation or amortization. We noted no significant changes to the estimates made by management, and we believe the estimates are reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. The disclosures in the financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear. There were no significant or unusual transactions, significant difficulties, audit findings, or other concerns as part of this year's audit. We identified no misstatement as part of this year's audit. This slide shows the upcoming standards that may affect Brazos over the next couple of years. GASB 101 updates the recognition and measurement for compensated absences. Compensated absences include vacation, sick leave, paid time off, holidays, parental leave, bereavement leave, and certain types of sabbatical leave. A liability should be recorded when the leave has been earned, accumulates, and is more likely than not to be used. GASB 102 is meant to provide financial statement users with information about certain risks when circumstances make a government vulnerable to heightened possibility of loss or harm. It requires the government to disclose essential information about risks related to vulnerabilities due to certain concentrations or constraints. GASB 103 establishes or modifies existing accounting and financial reporting requirements related to your management discussion and analysis, unusual or infrequent items, previously known as extraordinary and special items, in the presentation of the statement of revenues and expenses and changes in net position. GASB 104 requires certain types of capital assets to be disclosed separately in the capital assets note disclosures, including lease and subita intangible assets, and requires additional disclosure for capital assets held for sale. More detail of these standards and potential impacts can be found in the audit results letter. I would like to thank Michelle, Matt, and the rest of the Brazos finance team for their help during this year's audit. They were readily available and answered our questions and requests timely. The hours it took Baker Tilly's team to complete the audit was approximately 350 hours, and I estimate the finance team devoted at least a third or more to prepare for this year's audit while still doing their day job, which is not an easy task. This concludes my presentation over the fiscal year 24 financial audit. If you have any questions regarding the results of this year's audit or the upcoming fiscal year 24 audit, please don't hesitate to contact Aaron or I. Thank you and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. So now, if there are any questions, I will try and answer questions that have to do with BRA's involvement in the audit. I may not be able to answer any specific questions as to things that Baker Tilly did in the audit. But as always, they work for you, and you can contact them if you have any questions or concerns.
Any questions for Michelle? Okay. Seeing that there's no questions, we have a resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby accepts the Brazos River Authority's annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended August 31, 2024, and approves its filing with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And be it further resolved that the Chief Financial Officer is hereby designated to file the report and the annual filing of the affidavit with the Executive Director of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
Please poll the board. Yes.
Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Moving to our second agenda item, discussion and possible action on Brazos River Authority investment policy by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer.
Our investment policy requires us at least once a year to review the investment policy. Working with Valley View Consulting, who is our investment manager, we've come up with just a few changes for this year. One was to update some of the job titles of some of the designated investment officers, mainly the controller and the cash and debt manager. The second is to add the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund, the NCUSIF, as an additional entity that can guarantee or insure financial deposits. They're kind of like the FDIC, except for credit unions. And then to update the revised and adopted date of the investment policy for these two changes. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Michelle?
All right, we have a resolution.
I see no questions. Please read the resolution.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that it has reviewed and hereby adopts the Brazos River Authority investment policy, including the investment strategy statement, approved broker-dealer list, and approved training sources, as presented to the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority on January 27, 2025.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. The motion was made by You okay? Motion was made by Director Wilson. A second? By David. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes?
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 3, discussion and possible action on ratification of the 2025 rates for replaceable water supply agreements, 2-tier contracts by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the item where we come to you every year and get you to approve the rates for our 2-tier water contracts. They're called 2-tier because the rate has 2 levels, an election and an option use. The election is the price they pay for the water they're using. The option is for the water they have reserved. These agreements came out of a negotiated settlement of the rate case in 1991. There are 13 2-tier agreements. They total 98,999 acre feet. They make up 14% of our total acre feet under contract. When we come to you with our annual operating plan in July and when we have our customer meetings out in the basin in June, we present the estimated 2-tier rates. They're calculated based on a specific calculation or formulas in the contracts. And so we have to use the Consumer Price Index for the month of November, which usually isn't published until sometime mid to late December. And as soon as we get those rates, we can calculate what the actual rate is going to be. We send letters out to the customers in December knowing them of the proposed 2-tier rates. The proposed rates require board ratification in January, which is what we're doing this morning. The rates for 2025 for activated water are going to go from $30.37 per acre foot to $30.76. For the non-activated or the option water, it's going to go from $15.18 to $15.38. Once approved, we will invoice the two-tier customers. Are there any questions?
questions
in
for
regards
Michelle?
to two-tier?
One question for you. You said that this went out to all the customers. Did they have any feedback on that? Did you hear anything?
No,
Either
we
way.
did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Any other questions? All right, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby ratifies the 2025 rates of $30.76 per acre foot for election use water and $15.38 per acre foot for option use water, as adjusted in accordance with the formula stated in the existing replacement water supply agreements.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Crone, a second made by Director LaChance. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes?
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey, Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
I request that we pull item number 4 off the agenda.
I think Director Boren can motion for all of us on that one.
That hurts my heart.
A, we will remove item number 4. Items 5, 6, and 7 are all report and possible discussion, and we'll start with number 5, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2025 first quarter budget report by Michelle Giroux.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item we usually point out is in your books, and if you have any questions, you can ask. I wanted to take an opportunity to go ahead and walk through this one this quarter. We have a few changes. This is the first quarterly financial report that we have published out of our new financial software that we implemented and we went live with October 1st. This budget report is comparing year-to-date actuals against the total annual budget. The reports that you were used to seeing in the past had a year-to-date budget. So this is a little different. We have reformatted the financial statements also to reflect the recent reorganization that BRA has gone through. And we have added a discussion of variances in the water supply budget that I think is more useful than just looking at year-to-date actuals against a year-to-date budget. And so this is a little example. I know that's a little hard to see. But the top section talks about the revenues and each class of revenue in the water supply. You can see with the raw water sales, we're at 85% to budget when we're only 25% through the fiscal year, and that's because most of our system rate water gets billed in the first month of the year. We have a few customers who choose to pay out quarterly or monthly, so that's why those revenues are so high at the beginning of the year. Down on the expense side, everything's pretty much falling into line. You notice debt service, let's see, I'm gonna try and do, okay, I can't figure. Debt service down at the bottom, we're only at 7%. but that's as expected. Debt service payments for our East Williamson County plant and Allen's Creek are not due until February and August. So when we come back with the second quarter, you'll see that number go up. So right now, we're all green lights, but again, we're only 25% through the year, so you would hope everything would still be a green light that early in the year. Anyway, I wanted to show this to y'all and hope maybe you find it useful. If you have any suggestions, we are always happy to try and give you the information you need or that you want to see. This is, you're used to seeing this little graph that shows annual budget against year-to-date actuals. And then we have a short condensed financial statement for the water supply system. And then we have our expenditures by category, and as you can see, salaries and benefits, and then professional services make up the bulk of our expenses. So anybody have any questions or? Okay, this is a report only, so there's no resolution to.
Any questions for Michelle? Yes.
Just a statement, I do like the new format out that
Okay,
helped
great.
a lot.
That's good to know.
All right. Moving along to agenda item number 6, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2025 first quarter investment report by Michelle Giroir.
And so this report is also in your books, and there have been no changes to that. So if anybody had any questions or wanted to discuss that.
Any questions for Michelle?
Thank you.
Michelle, thank you. Today was your day. And then there's Matt.
Sorry.
Okay, Matt. Tell us what's happening. Report and possible discussion on legislative update by Matt Phillips, Deputy General Manager.
Good morning. I'm going to give you guys a pretty high-level brief overview. I'm not going to go through a bunch of bills. You can expect that in March. I will have a much longer presentation where I will go through lists of bills that we're watching and tracking, but I'm going to keep it short today and just kind of hit the high notes. So probably one of the biggest outstanding issues when we last met in November was who was going to be the Speaker of the House. That was undecided at that point, and it was actually undecided all the way up until the first day of session, which is pretty rare. Normally they figure that out a week or two before behind closed doors, but this one went all the way to the floor. They ended up having 2 votes, first with 3 candidates, and then the top 2 candidates, which were Dustin Burrows and David Cook, went to a runoff vote, and Dustin Burrows won. I think it was 85 to 55 was the final vote tally. So what that means is the House can now get organized, so to speak. They can begin work because now they have a speaker. One of the first things they would do is appoint committees. The House has not yet appointed their committees. That's not unexpected. When you have a new speaker, it's going to take a little bit longer. They've got to get their leadership team organized and figure out who's going to chair committees. One of the bigger issues in the speaker's race was whether or not the minority party could hold chairmanships. And that was probably the key issue in the speaker's race. And the House adopted their rules this past Thursday, and in those rules, they have the stipulation that only the majority party may hold chairmanships, but only the minority party may hold vice chairmanships. So what that means this session is you're going to see all Republican chairs and all Democrat vice chairs. And that was the compromise they chose to strike. So we will see how that goes. That will be the first time this has happened since the late 60s. Since then, the House and also the Senate have allowed the minority party to hold chairmanships. That will no longer be the case. The Senate made that change this past session as well. The Senate has appointed their committees. It's not surprising that they're ahead of the House. You know, when they come in, they already know who their leadership is. Most of their chairs that were coming back were incumbents. So it's not at all surprising that they're ready to go. They've actually started having committee hearings. They started their first one today. Senate Finance is starting to work on the budget. So not surprising there. The budget surplus, we talked about this in November, not knowing what it was going to be, ended up being 24 billion. That's about 10 billion less than they had last time around, but it's still a good amount. Now, I mentioned this last time and I'll say it again. There are already a lot of known and stated priorities for that 24 billion. So I wouldn't look at it as 24 billion. I would look at it as 24 minus a lot, probably half. I know that they're going to want to do some additional property tax relief. They did 18 billion last time. I don't know how much they're going to do, but I would think that would take a sizable chunk out of that 24 billion. You've got school choice that is going to cost something, and so the odds are they're going to implement some sort of school choice legislation, and a chunk of funding that will come out of that surplus. They're going to want to make some continued improvements to the electric grid, so I imagine that some of that money will go there. And then you've also got public school finance, and they'll have to throw some money at that, and some of that may come out of that surplus. I do still think water is a priority, and I think it's going to get some of that money, but it's going to have to compete with all of those other things, like it always does. And then in terms of emergency items, the governor has not declared any emergency items yet. Those are the things that the legislature as a body can act on within the first 60 days. Constitutionally, the first 60 days are usually meant for organization and the meeting of committees to get bills out of committee and onto the floor. But emergency items designated by the governor do not fall under that, and they can be acted on in the first 60 days. Typically, the governor will announce emergency items in his state of the state, which is currently scheduled for this Sunday, which means that it will not be held in front of a joint session of the legislature, which is a little atypical. It's been done before, but not usually. The Senate and the House are not planning on being in on Sunday, so I don't know where the governor's going to do it, but it may or may not be at the Capitol, is what it looks like. But you can expect that school choice will be one of those emergency items. I think that's already been stated, and there may be one or two others. We just don't know what they are yet until they're announced. And I only have 2 slides, so this is the last one. So we talked about the big water issues, and I've listed a few of them here. Thus far, we have not seen legislation on these major water topics. Now, we have seen one-time funding. Both the Senate and House base budgets are out, and they both include $2.5 billion for water infrastructure. And in fact, the Senate's version also includes in that 2.5 flood infrastructure. So it's, as far as water infrastructure goes, it's less than 2.5. I think anyone that's in our position and those that work in the water industry would tell you that that is lower than we were hoping for. I think even our champions in the House and the Senate would say that's lower. I think the governor has also said that's lower than he would like to see. So I think there will be some discussions on how much higher can we get that number? Can we get it closer to 5 billion? So we'll see how those work out. On these other issues, dedicated revenue source, so a continued funding stream for water infrastructure, extended debt terms so that you can finance water plan projects longer than 30 years, going out as far as 50 years. We have not seen bills on those yet. We have also not seen bills on a number of other major water policy and funding issues related to water infrastructure. What we are expecting is that sometime before mid-February, we will see a package of bills, 4 to 6 bills, that will address those topics and some others. Some of the other topics we're hearing will be addressed. If you remember last session, they created 2 new water funds, the Texas Water Fund, which is your traditional water development board programs, and then the new water supply fund, which goes beyond the state water plan and does some of these large gargantuan projects like bringing in water from other states, large-scale desal, moving East Texas water west to the I-35 corridor, basically a giant network grid of pipelines across the state moving water from where it is to where it's needed. That's the purpose of that fund. I think you will see some legislation making some tweaks to those funds in terms of what types of projects are eligible. I think you'll see some legislation creating some additional oversight of those funds, potentially a legislative committee that will oversee how those funds are administered. And then the other one that we're hearing about, and this is a big one, is the potential of a bill that will create a new statewide entity, a new authority or a new district. Maybe think about it as a statewide river authority on steroids. And that entity will be tasked with implementing this massive water supply plan for Texas, these huge projects. So they will be tasked with building and maintaining and operating the pipelines that will move water from one place to another with these large-scale projects. Don't know what that's going to look like yet. A lot of us have seen bits and pieces or heard bits and pieces, but we won't really know how that's going to play out until we see the full package. But at the end of the day, that is a big deal. I mean, that's a huge sea change from what we're used to in terms of water being more of a local, regionally driven issue to now it potentially being a state top-down driven issue. Yes, sir.
Is that one entity or multiple entities?
We don't know yet. We've heard it as one, just one big entity. Now, it may have regional components in it, maybe like regional departments, I guess, but it's expected to be one large statewide entity with a really big job to do.
Right, exactly.
And it's not to replace any of us. That's probably a good point to make. And now how we would interface with that entity and work with that entity, again, a lot of that's going to remain to be seen. When we see the legislation, we'll be able to tell. And again, we've seen bits and pieces of it, and the combination of all those pieces might add up to a whole pie, but we also don't want to get out ahead of our champions and those that are trying to help us in terms of talking about it. So we'll see those when they get filed in the next couple of weeks.
Do we know what's driving that entity, the creation of that entity?
I think it's the thought that with the growth that we're seeing and the massive water supply needs that we're seeing, that the state is going to have to step in and play a bigger role than it has in the past. I think that going beyond just giving low interest loans from the Water Development Board, it's that the state needs to step in and be potentially an owner and have, more skin in the game in terms of trying to create new water supply.
And Director Ambrose, I think all of these, the type of projects that we're talking about are very large projects that cross 5 or 6 or 7 different river basins, and having one entity that could champion and try to move those forward instead of having 7 or 8 entities at a table trying to figure out how to fund and manage and engineer and all those things. I think that's the concept.
It's gonna be interesting.
Yes, it will be.
We have questions from Dr. Ruiz and Director Parks here.
I assume you know about the data mining center in East Temple, so that Bell County. And then I guess the Stargate up in Abilene, is that correct? Is that going to affect us with the water?
We haven't had any
Power.
discussions. We haven't had any discussions on any of those. It could affect water and power, but they haven't come to us. None of those have come to us looking for water. Now, we do provide water to the city of Abilene. We have a contract with them
Because
to
they
take water out
keep
of
all
Possum
that
Kingdom.
cooling. That's what I've been told. A lot of water.
Yeah, they do. And I would back up and say that's really the impetus for a lot of this focus on water, is that, Texas is growing so fast, and it's not just people, it's not just rooftops. We get these massive industrial needs that show up, kind of last minute to say, hey, we need 20,000 acre feet of water, and we need it in 3 years. So it's that's why I think you're seeing the motivation to try to go bigger and have the state play a bigger role.
Just wanted to ask, where is this originating from in terms of Senate, House, governors? Where's the direction coming from, putting this together?
I think leadership in both bodies is involved. I think they're all part of the discussion. Obviously, Chairman Charles Perry, the Senate Water Committee Chairman, has been the most vocal champion for a lot of this stuff. And so I think that the package of bills get filed will likely have his name on them. And they'll likely originate in the Senate only because I couldn't tell you right now. I could take a guess on who's going to chair House Natural Resources. I could give you my top 2, but we don't know yet.
We have another question from Director Savage.
Yes, sir.
So Matt, I know this is a little bit speculative, but we spent $8 billion on the border as a state, which should have been done by the federal government. Has there been any discussion about reimbursement so that we would have that $5 million for water? If we could get it back from the federal government.
There's been bills filed on it, yes. Yeah, there's been legislation filed asking for a reimbursement. I know that the governor has at least mentioned the idea of it. So, yeah, I think there's going to be an attempt. Whether or not it'll be successful, I don't know. Usually when you send your money up there, it's kind of hard to get it back. Think about your taxes. So, but I'll close this first part of the discussion by saying a lot of details to be worked out. It sounds really big. Some of it sounds a little scary, but at the end of the day, it's all positive. You have to really look at it like that. Water is at the forefront of the issues that the legislature is looking at this session. Now, we may still have to compete for money. We're going to have to compete for money with all these other priorities, but we're no longer having to compete for attention as a policy issue. It is at the forefront all the leadership, the governor will continue talking about it. So that's a positive thing that comes out of all of this, regardless of how it all turns out. And we will, as things move forward, we will provide our input and our expertise when requested. We'll probably provide our input and expertise even when it's not requested sometimes. So closer to home, if you remember, we passed a bill allowing us to do aquifer storage and recovery in Williamson County because of some of the Edwards aquifer rules. We needed legislation last session, got all the way through, and then it got vetoed during the property tax fight. So we're running with that one again. We actually got it pre-filed this session. So last session we got it filed 2 days before the filing deadline. We're much earlier this time. We got it filed in December. So we're working with Senator Schwartner and Representative Harris Davila to get those things moving and schedule them for hearings. The odds are we will probably start in the Senate because they're moving a little bit faster. So we're already having conversations with them and with the committee office to get those bills set and get them moving. We'd like to get those out of the way and get them to the governor as soon as we can.
So the thought that it was a bad time?
We just got caught up in the shrapnel of the property tax fight. If you remember, during the first special session on property tax reform, the governor had about a week where he was just vetoing bills left and right. And many of those vetoes were aimed at members of the legislature that he was feuding with over how to address property taxes. So a lot of folks' bills met that same fate. And in the veto proclamation, the message that the governor wrote for the veto, it didn't criticize the nature of the bill. Matter of fact, it said this is a very important issue. It's just not as important as property tax reform. So we expect to be successful. We think we're going to be okay. And then the bill filing deadline, I only mention that because that's the last day that the legislature can file non-local bills. They will file a steady stream of bills each day up until about a week out from the bill filing deadline, and then they will file a gargantuan amount of bills during that last week. That's everybody getting their last minute things in. So it'll require a lot of work on our part in terms of going through and tracking all of those as we get to the March deadline. But I mentioned that also to tell you that when I come back at the end of March and in front of y'all, again, it will be a much longer presentation. We'll go through a bunch of the different bills that we're tracking, how they affect us. And by that time, we'll actually have a better idea of what's actually moving versus stuff that's just been filed. And we'll definitely know what these big water bills look like. So that's all I got. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Matt. Well, we'll be back here in March, so hopefully we'll have some bills bubble to the top that we can start getting some specific info on. Thank you.
We will.
All right. We're moving right along to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on authorization to finalize and execute an interlocal and contractual agreement with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department by Destiny Rosshuber, Staff Counsel.
Okay, thank you. So the interlocal and contract I'm going to be talking to you all about today is about 20 years in the making. So I'm going to walk you through the history just to give you a better idea about how we got here. But essentially, this donation is something that it's been a working effort to finalize. I really would have loved to come with y'all to something that is done, but just due to the timing of this contract, we're going to have to ramp things up a little bit. So basically, the donation would memorialize BRA's dedication of 3,500 acre-feet of water per year to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department along the main stem of the Brazos Basin, the Brazos River, sorry. This dedication initially spurred from a 2011 Memorandum of Understanding with Texas Parks and Wildlife that was created during our systems operations permit. So some of you may recall that's our rocket science permit. That is basically the most complicated water right that we have. It was a very long application process, and that's really what I'll walk y'all through today. So in 2004, we filed that permit with the TCQ. At the time, the way that water right permits were done is you filed an application, people could protest, and then a draft permit would be created. And that made things a little difficult for our really complex permit. So it took from 2004 to 2010 before we actually arrived at the State Office of Administrative Hearing process. During that time, we settled out with a handful of protesters, but like I said, this was a very complicated permit, so we ended up bringing a lot of those protesters into our first SOA hearing. Parks was one of those protesters. They were largely concerned about environmental flows. At that time, the state had not set any criteria in place, and so we had agreed in this MOU in 2011 to work with parks to develop environmental flow criteria for the permit, as well as dedicate at the time 13,400 acre feet of water to the Texas Water Trust, where parks would be the trustee. By the time the actual first SOA hearing happened in 2014, the state had passed their environmental flows criteria, so a lot of that MOU went away except the donation. Parks was super helpful during that process. They testified on our behalf, but at the end of the 2014 process, we were required to develop our water management plan. So that is essentially like the playbook of how we run our water rights. Within that water management plan, there is a technical report. So the plan is kind of the explanation of what we do. The technical report is the math and the modeling to support the plan. So in that technical report, we put in and officialized our plan to do this dedication, but we actually hadn't sussed out the dedication like we have now. So we got through everything. We got our permit in 2018. We got our water management plan. Within that permit, it required that we update the water management plan every 10 years, which we are gearing up to do, and that is due in 2026. So in 2020, we started discussions with parks on how to handle the dedication. There was a caveat that when we filed our first permit, we asked for a lot of water. We got reduced down to quite a bit of water, but we got reduced. So we reduced everyone proportionally. So we've been talking to parks since then. And in 2020, sorry, I'm getting a little fuzzy on the dates. In 2024, we undertook a joint effort to develop the actual dedication. It was pretty clear from how the legislation was drafted that it just wasn't going to be able to go in the water trust, but that we were still able to do a contractual agreement with parks. So we presented parks in September with the following dedication of 6,035 acre feet per year from Possum Kingdom Lake down to the Gulf of Mexico along the main stem of the Brazos River for in-stream uses, of which park accepted. And now we are in the process of generating both the contractual agreement and the interlocal, which will replace the MOU. We are very close to completing those documents. Here's more of a graphic representation too of the donation. And I can come back to this if you guys have more questions, but essentially it's the 6,000 acre feet per year. So we're required to do the update every 10 years. In our MOU with parks, we were required to put this dedication in our first update, which is due in 2026. So the reason that we're here today is that our parks dedication is just one portion of the WMP update, which is beginning to ramp up based on the scheduling that we need to get it done by November. So we are at a point where we need to get this dedication finalized and executed by March. So I just don't have until the March board meeting to wait. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. I know it's very complicated and it's a lot of history. So I have a resolution, but I'll take any questions. And I can even go back, and Peyton's also here to answer some of your hydrological questions about the donation if you have any.
Okay, Director Boren has a question.
The trust of Texas Water Trust, where do they store that water?
Yeah, so the trust is more of
Is it a paper thing?
yeah, kind of. Basically, it's a part of the water bank. So the Texas Water Bank is run by the Texas Water Development Board. You can store, the board doesn't actually own any rights. If you would like to donate to them, you can store those rights with them, and then somebody is the trustee. But the water trust itself is just for donated water rights. So the bank has some wording in the legislation that they could buy it, they just don't. Mostly how it works is that you donate to the
Is it just a
trust.
set aside in case?
Yeah, so there's only 3 in the trust because the legislation isn't as fun, I think, as people would like it. But there was a property in Laredo who owned the water rights around their property. They donated the water rights to the trust and then turned their property into conservation land. So that's kind of ideally. It is really just supposed to be for environmental and in-stream use purposes, and it's a way to preserve that water for the environment.
The second question is, why would Possum Kingdom donate 6,000 acres to the Gulf of America?
It's not all coming from Possum Kingdom,
Right,
and
it's-
yeah.
Thing is defining.
Sorry, I forgot.
Defining that water is anywhere between Possum Kingdom and the Gulf of America.
Why
Yeah.
would we do that?
Yeah, so basically, let me go into more of the donation. And sorry, I forgot to
Not
change
keep
it.
Why would we want to dump it? Why would we not want to store it or keep it or use it?
Because when you're in contract negotiations to try to get hundreds of thousands of more, you have to settle
Okay.
these issues to get what you can.
Got it. Okay, I'm slow, but I'll get there. Okay.
Yeah, so Parks would be able, so as you see all the numbers on the donation chart, Parks would be able to ask for water, call for water in any of those places to increase the flow rate. So they're not allowed to divert. They would basically just saying, we want the flows to increase at reach 29. They would work with our water services staff to figure about how much of their donation they would be using to do that, but all the water would stay in the stream. And that's a requirement of getting an in-stream use permit or like using in-stream uses. That's kind of hard to explain.
Director Lattimore has a question.
Actually, I've got several questions, but let me start out. The basic question I've got is, I remember, and sometimes my memory's faulty, but I recollect that the SysOp talked about environmental flow rates, but now you're talking about a guaranteed amount of water, which sounds pretty large to me. And you're talking about taking water from the upper end of the reservoir. I haven't heard any discussion about there being water available. And it sounds to me like you're talking about water that is from the guaranteed side of things. Do we have that water available?
Yeah, so this water that we're donating
Don't say yeah. I'm asking a real pointed question. Yes or no, do we have the water available?
Yes, this water was reserved during the time when we did the SysOps permit. So this isn't water that we've sold and we're trying to take back. This is water that's been set aside for parks since the concept of the donation when we did the MOU in 2011.
Okay, thank you. Now, the second question is, we had, if I remember right, some 90 cubic feet per second, and I'm not I am an engineer, but not a water engineer, hydrologist. But we had some 90 odd cubic feet per second that had to be released from Possum Kingdom for environmental flows, if I remember right. How does that equate to this number? Is that the same water that we're talking about?
No,
Or is that different water?
It's separate. So we have the requirements in the SysOps permit. That doesn't count towards this. We'll be meeting and achieving those, and then this is something that parks will be able to utilize for their own projects.
So this is additional water that we're going to have to release from Possum Kingdom.
No. Aaron, do you want to get in? I'll let Aaron.
No, sir, go back to the map.
Yeah.
Please. So I think the confusion is when we talk about the system operations permit, it is water from stored or flowing in the river from Possum Kingdom all the way to the coast, including all of the tributaries. However, water upstream of Possum Kingdom is not included. So that's the reason we framed it from Possum Kingdom. If we're in the middle of a significant drought and the park says, okay, we need 200 CFS at 28, then Aaron's team will be able to get together and figure out the most optimum use, the most optimum place to release that very small amount of flow to achieve what Parks and Wildlife wants us to achieve at number 28.
In addition, they'll have to comply with our drought contingency plan. That's a part of their contract. So it wouldn't be that they'd be in a really intense drought. That would change things based on our plan.
David, thank you very much. I think you just answered my question. The fact that we mentioned letting water out of Possum Kingdom is what really got my antenna up. Actually, you're talking about water through the whole basin.
Anywhere in the basin, and I would, going to speculate, so be careful here. But I would speculate that right, if we were gonna have to meet an issue in 2 or 3 or 4, since they're right downstream of the reservoirs, the low releases that we're releasing year-round anyway might meet those needs. So I personally think it would be more likely in other reaches of the stream that we would have to release water to meet some type of very complicated flow that Texas Parks and Wildlife is trying to achieve. And again, this is, the system operations permit gave us this much water. And then we modeled it down to what we thought was a very safe, conservative, firm yield to sell, and we got to this much water. And out of this much water is where we negotiated with Parks and Wildlife to take a much smaller amount of water out to allow them to be proactive in what they were trying to accomplish and work with us to accomplish a more robust amount of water that we were going to sell throughout the river system. Is that, you want to
And
correct any of that, Aaron?
No,
Okay.
that's correct.
The last of my questions, and then I'll be quiet. You're telling me that this water is already allocated in the system operating plan. This is not new water that we're talking about.
Yeah,
That's correct.
yeah, that's correct. So
Okay, that answers my question. Thank
Director
you.
Embro, and then Director Savage.
I guess I have a real basic question. Worst case scenario, how would this agreement impact the operations of BRA?
yeah, so that's excellent point. So coordination, Destiny mentioned coordination between BRA Water Services and Texas Parks and Wildlife to develop, their needs as far as when they need the water, how it's released, and all the accounting. So there would be some, coordination, which we have coordination with our customers, and, Texas Parks and Wildlife would, they're more or less going to be a customer, with this agreement and contract. So, just additional coordination. We will have accounting that is specific to this, just like we do with our other customers in the water accounting process. So I don't know if that answers.
Let me add something to that, because I think the question is brilliant. It will not impact how we operate our contracted obligations.
That's the question.
That's the question he's asking, and I think that's the answer.
Okay.
The one-time big release, or is it, how do you release it?
So it's up to the situation. It's up to, every drought is different. And let's say that Texas Parks and Wildlife had a small area where they were concerned about a mussel or a fish, and they needed this much water in the river, then that's what we would release to put this much water in the river. But I think also we've got to get our mind around what 6,000 acre feet of water looks like. If I ask for a 6,000 acre foot release out of Lake Whitney tomorrow, what would that do to the lake level, Aaron?
It would, for one
We'll
one
lose
day,
more
it
of
would-
the
it would be a couple
evaporation
inches.
probably that day. So it's a really minuscule amount of water when we're talking about.
6,000 acres would cover the one.
Yeah, and Lake Whitney's 23,000 acres. So it would be a very small impact to a very large reservoir like Whitney.
Director Savage has a question.
So since it's a contract and, a legal, if there is a drought and then we are in a situation where the water master is kind of changing things, how is that handled, with regard to this figure?
Yeah, so, that process is, this contract will still have to go by the drought contingency plan and our water conservation plan. So, as far as drought triggers and implementation of reductions in use, they would have to, go along with those same reductions. So, as far as the water master is concerned, like I said, they're going to be treated like another customer. So we release water from a reservoir. We, assume certain losses, and all that is incorporated into our accounting plan. It's conveyed to the water master, on a daily basis or multiple times a day, and gets approved through the water master and TCQ.
I have a question, Aaron. So who determined what that amount of water was going to be? Because this was, well, you're coming up to the 10th year of having to renew. So this has been a while, and clearly we have so many more needs for water up and down the basin. So who determined what that amount of water was going to be in the contract? Or how did y'all come about that number?
Yeah, so originally, in the original MOU that we had with Texas Parks and Wildlife, there was, the permit application was, like David said, it was a large amount of water. And that MOU with Parks had a specific amount of water associated with the original permit.
Did they ask for
That they asked for. And we coordinated with them as far as the MOU. Then, as the process went through and we went through 2 SOA hearings, our permit was reduced, and obviously their memorialized amount that was in the MOU was reduced. Additionally, when we went through, the allocation of SysOps in 2019, we had, around 400,000 acre feet or more of needs at the time that we were trying to satisfy, through additional water supply projects and, with system operations as well. And we reduced that amount down. So that's how we came to the 6,000 acre feet. So there was multiple iterations of the permit application that reduced their amount in their original MOU, and as well as reducing the amounts due to the overall needs in the basin in the 2018-2019 period when we allocated the system operation permit water.
So we started a process. We submitted an application for a permit. Parks and Wildlife came in and said, hey, pump the brakes. You may be asking for too much. Let's set aside some water for the environment, and here's how much we think we need to set aside. And that began the negotiation that got us to that 13,000 acre foot number. And then ultimately, as the process came refined, it's the 6,000 acre foot number that we're at today.
Okay.
So that's the process of how that number was selected.
Director
Presiding
Taylor
officer.
had a question, and then right here, Director Huber.
Aaron, this may be a stupid question, but does Texas Parks and Wildlife pay for the water?
This is going to be a donation.
I was afraid you were going to answer it that way. Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, this is completely separate from our Senate Bill 3, I guess it is, environmental flow that we do anyway to keep the river viable, right?
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay, Jen.
David, is now the time to ask a question about how the resolution is written, or should
Sure,
I wait
it is.
until after?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the way that the resolution is written makes me feel like, and it's in this, the second kind of paragraph there, I don't read that as along the stream segment from Possum Kingdom Lake to the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that's what Director Lattimore was getting at is the way that reads makes me think that it's only from the lake. So could we amend that to say for use in the stream segment from Possum Kingdom Lake to the Gulf of Mexico?
Yes, sure.
This was how the donation was accepted. So that could also just be like, this is how Parks and I have been talking about it back and forth. So that's
Yeah,
no
we can do that.
problem amending it to make that more clear.
Sure, I'm just a dumb engineer, and that's
No,
the
no,
way
no,
I
that's
read
fine.
it.
Yeah.
And so I
what
think
it
that it
says.
would be more
Yeah, that's
clear
what it says. That's
that
right.
way.
I agree.
So, just explain what is your recommendation, Jen? What are you asking?
Yeah, my recommendation is to amend the sentence in the second bullet point. So it would say, whereas BRA offered and Texas Parks and Wildlife has accepted a dedication of 6,000 acre feet per year for use in the stream segment from Possum Kingdom Lake to the Gulf of Mexico and leave the rest of it like that.
But it says along the main
Yes, we'll flip
stem.
that.
Yeah,
It already says along the main stem of the Brazos 4 in-stream uses after that. I have no comment.
We can certainly, if you'd like to move on to the next agenda item, we can certainly work on that and then come back right at the end and present you with a different resolution if you'd like, that reads a little bit different, so that it clarifies that it's not just Possum Kingdom.
Yeah, I will say that's also kind of what in-stream uses mean, is like it stays in the stream, but I have no problem typing it up and refixing it and seeing if y'all like that better, so.
Thank you.
Director LaChance, did you have a question? Was there another question on this side? I feel like I missed somebody. Director Wellen.
Just one question, since we're in the mode of donating versus selling. Understanding how the Texas Parks and Wildlife is intending to use this from an environmental perspective ought to be something that they can explain to us, so we can show how we're being good partners, or take advantage of it in some way, since it is a donation. I think from a public information perspective, just a suggestion.
I think it's going to be very variable how they want to use it from year to year. I think they're going to look at the basin, look at the status of flows in the basin, and say, okay, we have a state threatened mussel here. We're a little concerned about BRA. Can you make that a little wetter this year? Or if we're in a relatively good wet year, they may not call on it at all. Or they may want to go, okay, lower Brazos, we're concerned about the shoal chub, and we want to make a quick little pulse, because if that fish doesn't breed every 2 years, he's going to go extinct, because he's got a very short lifespan and a very short breeding window to reproduce. So trying to get them to define an agreement and sign, they're never going to do that, because we're basically letting them, they can ask for water under certain terms and conditions if we have it available in any of our streams below our major reservoirs. So it's...
Yeah, your answer is making my point, but in a half full way versus half empty.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, when that does occur, it's good PR for us to know that we're partnering with them to accommodate those things. So from a state perspective, to say, hey, we're a team player, we're part of this. As it varies from year to year, just communication to us. I think we should obligate them to communicate to us what's happening, so we can, say, hey, look what we're doing today for the state of Texas.
I agree with that, and we'll get something from them that will bookend what the goals of that process are.
Yeah, I will say we're already planning on doing some of that effort. I expect a lot of coordination, and then even after this is signed, we already have a meeting on the books to start working with Parks' hydrologists just to see, and biologists, to see what they're kind of thinking of doing, and just assisting with what we know and how we operate to see if we can make that work a little bit better. So that is something already on the books. Anything else?
So we're going to go work on this and bring it back at the end of the meeting, and we're going to address that language in the second paragraph and the fourth paragraph, because it's the same type of language, and we'll be back with you shortly. Does that work?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, David, real quick.
All right, we're going to move to agenda number 9. And we'll
It's gonna
circle
make a
back to
difference.
8.
Did they really change it?
Number
to
9,
go
discussion
for-
possible action on DeCordova Bend Dam Trifecta Project Budget Transfer by Blake Kettler, Executive Projects Portfolio Manager. Blake. Morning.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, members of the board. In May 2024, the board approved execution of a contract with Walter P. Moore. Walter P. Moore is providing engineering services to extend the service life of DeCordova Bend Dam at Lake Granbury through the Trifecta project. The proposed action we are requesting here today is for the board to consider to address the timing differences in project delivery and an associated budget amendment. If you recall, there are 3 components associated with the proposed engineering work of the Trifecta project. 1, determine the best approach to replace the existing trolley cart from the 1950s that raises and lowers the stop logs into position to perform maintenance and inspection services. 2, perform repairs to the buttress 1 and 44 and the embankment retaining walls. And 3, conduct a comprehensive Tanner Gate and Tanner Gate hoist system evaluation to include a structural and coatings assessment. Consider adding downstream platforms for maintenance and inspection access, and potentially additional freeboard to the gates. So here's a quick glimpse of where we are in time and space. The board approved a contract with Walter P. Moore in May of 2024. We executed a contract in August and issued a notice to proceed in September 2024. We had established our FY25 budget back in January 2024. Staff knew the budget was extremely conservative. We had a very comprehensive scope, but we also didn't want to overestimate budget expenditures until a firm scope, fee, and schedule was established. To allow Walter P. Moore to continue assessing De Cordova Bend Dam, we're requesting to transfer a portion of funds from the Bell House Drought Preparedness Project. The Bell House project will not fully utilize the funds allocated in FY25. So I have a resolution for consideration. You can see that we are proposing to reallocate $150,000 to cover the remaining expenses in FY25 for the Buttress 1 and 44 improvements associated with the project. Likewise, we would be transferring $900,000 to address the work on the stop log replacement project. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Blake? Director
Yes, sir.
Embro?
Yeah, can you clarify a little bit better regarding the transfer? Is this additional to the negotiated?
No, sir. It's part of that negotiated amount. What we did, we set our budget back in 25, and at that time we're going. We're ahead of schedule. Yes, we're going into scope and fee. We set a very conservative amount because we weren't really sure what that was looking like. So it's basically just moving funds from another project where we had some excess funds to cover that on a budget cycle as opposed to increasing the overall project amount. So we're progressing well. We're moving. This is just to keep up with the burn rate there.
Okay, so there has been already a contract that was presented to the board for X amount of dollars.
Yes,
right?
sir.
And
Yes,
that
sir.
number is not going to change. You're
No, sir.
just allocating buckets to feed that.
That's right.
Correct. We're just
amount.
pulling it from this bucket and dropping it over there. So
Okay.
keep paying them to do what they're doing out there.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else? All right, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby approves and authorizes a budget transfer from the fiscal year 2025 Bell House Drought Preparedness Capital Improvement Project of $150,000 to fiscal year 2025 Lake Granbury Buttress 1 and 44 Repairs Capital Improvement Project budget to cover timing differences in project delivery. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby approves and authorizes a budget transfer from the fiscal year 2025 Bell House Drought Preparedness Capital Improvement Project of $900,000 to fiscal year 2025 Lake Granbury Stop Log Replacement System Capital Improvement Project budget to cover timing differences in project delivery.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Director Wilson and Director LaChance. The first and second motion, please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes?
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Jimenez?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Discussion and possible action on Bell House Drought Preparedness Project Engineering Contract by Brad Brunette, Chief Operations Officer.
So, good morning, everyone. This is an action item. We're going to ask you to approve an engineering services contract with Walker Partners for the Bell House Drought Preparedness Project, or as some people prefer, the Belton to Stellhouse Hollow Pipeline. I want to acknowledge we've got a couple of folks with Walker Partners here today. We've got Aaron Archer over here and Jed Walker here for the presentation, and they'll be the ones leading the efforts for us there. So just real quick, this is a conceptual map showing the pipeline that would connect Lake Belton to Stillhouse Hollow. Many of you have seen this map many times. The pipeline route that we've identified there is only about 7 miles, so it's a pretty short pipeline, but it's really going to be a complex project because it's more than a pipeline. It's an intake structure in Lake Belton, a discharge structure in Lake Stillhouse Hollow, and there's some complexities there with regard to it's more than just a 7-mile pipeline, and we'll get into some of that. The other thing I want to note right now is it's a very important project for our system and for our customers at Stillhouse Hollow. We have many customers that divert water there, and this project is going to be needed in the future as demands increase to ensure their reliability of water. So we've been planning for this for over 25 years. This is actually a resolution that the BRA Board of Directors adopted back in 2005, some of your predecessors that set things in motion. We contracted for roughly 35,000 acre feet of water per year from the two lakes between 2005 and 2007. And if you look at the left-hand side of the resolution there, you see the language that says commitment to supply additional water. And so those water sales were the result of that part of the resolution. And by entering those contracts, it obligated us to ultimately build infrastructure to be able to reliably supply them, particularly at Stillhouse Hollow. And if you look at the right-hand side of the resolution there, you'll see the language that the plan is to include capital improvements necessary to meet demands from water commitments. And so the infrastructure, the capital improvements that were referred to there is what we're talking about today with the pipeline from Belton to Stillhouse Hollow. Another thing that I want to point out is this project, in addition to being over 25 years old, it's been included in the state's regional water planning process for many years and has been a recommended strategy there as well. So one of the things, this is another slide. This was actually in the 2005 presentation to the board as well. One of the things I want to note is that Belton and Stillhouse Hollow are really regional supply lakes. There's a lot of, I guess, misconception out there that the water either goes to Bell or Williamson County, and that's not the case. You can see that there's 8 counties, including Bell County. Every adjacent county to Bell County gets water from either Lakes Belton or Stillhouse Hollow. So you see Williamson, Burnett, Lampasas, Coryell, McLennan, Falls, and Milam counties. And so it's not just a Williamson County, Bell County thing, and it's not just that all the water that goes to Stillhouse Hollow goes to Williamson County. If you look at Stillhouse Hollow, we probably have maybe 8 or 10 contracts with customers there, but some of our customers are regional treated water providers, like the Central Texas Water Supply Corporation. They supply water to, I think, over 15 different smaller water supply corporations and water supply districts. And so this project is going to be just as important for those smaller customers of our customer as it is for some of the larger customers in Williamson County. So another slide, I'm going through the history here, back to 2005. This is a slide that I found in the 2005 presentation. And if you look, this is Lake Stillhouse Hollow. We were looking at demand projections and how much water had been used at the time. And if you look back to about 2005, you'll see that our historical water use from 1990 through about that time was between 5,000 and 10,000 acre feet per year out of Stillhouse Hollow. Well, we got the original Williamson County raw water line built, and in 2006, we started flowing water through that pipeline. And so we were actually making this projection back before that pipeline ever started transferring water. And what you see here, and what I've noticed, I was surprised, it's nice when your projections actually come out to be pretty close, because if you look at how much water we used out of Lake Stillhouse Hollow in 2023, so I mean, we're right about here. It was about 53,000 acre feet. So our projections of what we were looking at the time have been, very close to where we are now. And back in those original times when we were planning for the project, about now is when, we knew this project was going to be necessary. And so that's why we're here bringing it to you today, is our demands are increasing there and are going to continue to increase in the future. So our current terminology for this project is the Bell House Drought Preparedness Project. So if you see it referred to that and wonder why, the reason is that the pipeline is not going to run very often. So most of the time when we have normal and wet years, there's going to be enough rainfall and runoff in the Lampasas River watershed that feeds Stillhouse Hollow to take care of all of our customers there. But when we have the dry years is when we're going to need this pipeline to supplement. So it's a drought preparedness project because it's not going to run all the time, and it's actually going to run probably much less frequently than the Williamson County raw water line does. There's three main components to the project. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. The pump station at Lake Belton, the pipeline from Lake Belton to Stillhouse Hollow, and then the discharge outlet at Lake Stillhouse Hollow. So our project approach from where we are right now is going to involve a couple of parallel components. We've completed a very detailed preliminary engineering effort that helped us scope out exactly what we think we need to build and where, and Walker Partners performed that effort for us. In the next phase from 25 to 2028 here, we'll be performing the engineering design, the detailed modeling and testing, obtaining permits and agency approvals, and that's going to be a substantial element of this project, and also easements for the pipeline. And you see the nature of the parallel efforts there. So we're going to be moving forward with design of the pump station at Lake Belton. You see along kind of the top arrow, and then along the bottom arrow is going to be the pipeline and the discharge structure. And then in about 2029, that's when we'll be going out for bids, and we'll actually be going out for two separate construction projects because the nature of the intake structure construction at Belton is so different from pipeline construction. We're looking at advertising for two separate projects there. And so you see the timeline. We estimate that 2032-ish is when we hope to be complete with the project. So these are some images that show the conceptual pump station on the left as well as the recommended pipeline route on the right. And I'll draw your attention to that pump station on the left. You can see the actual pump station on shore there in the red box. And just to orient yourself, you can see the Lake Belton Dam in the background. And if you're familiar with that area, just to the right of the red box is the Corps of Engineers Lake Office there at Lake Belton. And the way this pump station is going to operate is if you look at the building here, this is the pump station. So this is, what people would be able to see. Well, inside this building, there's going to be a wet well or a giant sump, if you will, that goes, 50, 80 feet. I don't remember how deep into the ground. And then at the bottom of that, there will be a tunnel going out to the lake with a pipeline in it. And you can see some, buoys or something out here. Again, this is just a kind of a rendering of what we expect it to look like. So right out here underneath the water, however deep it is there will be a pipe out there that water will flow from underwater back to the pump station into that giant sump, and then we'll have up to 4 pumps there that will pump it. So that's what it'll look like. Also, I wanted to go back to address a couple of the comments that Mr. Asbury made. So I mentioned the preliminary engineering effort that we've gone through. So we went through that from 2019 through 2023. And we looked at a lot of different options and locations for the pump station. We did look at co-locating with other folks that already had intake structures on the lake. We had pretty substantial conversations with Bell County WCID number 1, but the issue with that is the capacity that we need couldn't be accommodated without substantial improvements to, basically building a new structure that they had, or else. In the case of Bell County WCID number 1, one of our challenges there was where the pipeline route would need to leave that structure, there's just not room for another 48-inch pipeline there. So we did look at a lot of those options before we ended up, coming to this recommendation. And there was an extensive alternatives evaluation that looked at cost, environmental effects, socioeconomics, everything you can think of that went into the selection of this location for the structure and this being our preferred pipeline route here. One other thing that there's, back to the misconceptions, is there's always been a lot of fear that, BRE is going to build this pipeline and then we're going to go sell a bunch more water. And that's not the case at all. So this pipeline is needed for those contracts that I talked about earlier that we issued back in 2005 to 2007. We're not going to be writing any new contracts from Lake Stillhouse Hollow or Belton as a result of this construction. It's simply going to help us reliably supply the contracts that we have in place already moving forward. So on the engineering procurement side, we went out for requests for qualifications on this project back in late 2018. We received 5 proposals at that time. And we evaluated those, and we did do in-person interviews with 3 of those project teams. And we ultimately selected a team led by Walker Partners. And you can see the board resolution there on the right that authorized us to enter the contract with them to perform the preliminary engineering work that I mentioned a while ago. And they've done an outstanding job so far on the project, been very responsive, very cost conscious, and we're very pleased with them. And another thing about their firm is they're currently in the process of finishing construction on a very large intake structure in Lake Travis. So they're I don't know, I think well over halfway through construction there. And so that's a $200+ million project, bigger and more expensive than ours, very complex. And the guy that you see sitting right over here is their project manager. So he's been doing that for the Brushy Creek Municipal Utility District for several years now. Let's see. So this is a high-level outline of the scope elements for the next phase of the project that we're seeking your authorization for today. Task 1, you see, includes the standard 30, 60, 90, and 100% design elements for both the pump station and the pipeline. So, again, there will be kind of parallel tasks there. Task 2 includes quite a few specialty services that are going to be needed, particularly for the pump station design. And I've listed those here because, it's not necessarily intuitive what they are, but there's going to be a lot of geotech work and quite a bit of modeling work that goes in with the intake structure design. Task 3 is risk management. And as a part of that preliminary engineering effort, we had a whole task element identified in that where we had a risk analysis, and we've already got a very large risk register tracking all the risks that are associated with the project, as well as the things that we're going to need to do to mitigate and keep those risks in management as we move forward with the project. Task 4, we've got a pretty large public involvement component. This is going to be a controversial project, and so we know we're going to need to do a lot of public involvement and engagement, so we've built some funds in for that. Task 5 is for the surveying and land acquisition. So we're going to have to acquire easements from Lake Belton to Stillhouse Hollow. Again, it's about 7 miles. We're going to have to acquire easements from the Corps of Engineers to use their property to get out of Lake Belton and into Lake Stillhouse Hollow. And so we've got fees in here for that. Now, the number that you're going to see on the next slide doesn't include the actual acquisition of the easements. It's just the engineering and surveying services, all the things that we'll need to work through that process. And then finally, task 6 is jurisdictional and environmental agency approvals. We've got a list of, I think, about 10 different agencies that will be involved or have some say in this project. And so that's going to be a pretty significant component. And then task 7 will be for the bidding and contract award services, 4 years from now or so, once we get the project designed. So cost and schedule, we've got the cost elements here for the 7 tasks that I just mentioned on the last slide. And the last column shows these costs as a percentage of the estimated construction cost, which is right now about $122 million is what we're looking at construction of both of these projects to be. The duration for what we're talking about authorization for today is going to be close to 4 years. We expect to get from where we are today through the easement acquisition process and all the engineering design and geotech testing and stuff that we're going to need to do. So you get down to the bottom line, the total proposed not to exceed contract for a contract with Walker Partners for this phase of services is $24,750,281. And you can see that we've got an additional 10% that we're seeking your authorization for. We're not going to include that in the contract at this time, but we'll have it approved by the board, if we get a couple years down the road and we have unforeseen circumstances or things that we didn't contemplate that would be subject to the general manager's discretion to amend the contract without coming back for additional approval there. The next slide is the resolution, so I'll stop there and be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Director Boren has a question.
Task number 5, surveying and land acquisition right away. Are you talking about eminent domain?
It could be. We hope not. We're going to make every effort we can to be good neighbors and to, not have to go to eminent domain. But, if we have to, that's the last resort option.
And that slide where you show the lake and the circle, the circles together in the water. And that building there on the lake, is that Bubba Gump's restaurant?
No, it's Dead Fish.
It's the Fish City Grill.
Dead Fish Grill. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Have we heard from the owners of that restaurant? That's one question. I mean, do we know, is it gonna be loud, or, I know it's not gonna be treated water, so there's no,
Yeah, well, there'll be noise mitigation in the design. There'll be noise, but, you know, we deal with that at some of our other intake structures. And so, you know, I don't know when you say loud, I don't think it's going to be loud from a standpoint it's going to, you know, disrupt anything there. You might be able to hear it next door if it's calm and, you know, the weather's right. But we're going to, you know, do everything we can to make it as quiet as possible because we know that'll be one of the concerns. And we had a pretty large public meeting for the project a couple years ago in Belton, and I don't know if anybody on the project team remembers. I don't remember if we specifically talked with anybody with the restaurant there or not. They may have been at our public meeting, or we may have engaged them through our website.
Director Lloyd, I'd say this. We've worked with the Corps, and this will be our second intake like this where we've cored out into the reservoir and had a structure, and that structure is actually located in a Corps of Engineer park, and we've had no noise complaints from within the park with our other intake.
we already own this track, right?
No, we don't. We'll need an easement from the Corps for that, and we worked quite a bit with the Corps of Engineers on our alternatives analysis and all of this back when we were doing the preliminary engineering work. So we don't have their signature on the dotted line, but we've been working with them, and you know they've at least nodded their head with this location and this concept has been something that they could work with.
That's a core office right there, isn't it?
Yeah, right here in this area.
And there's campgrounds to the left and across the street too.
Back over here.
Yes, back over here, and then right across the street there's campgrounds.
So we may have to use eminent domain to take the core out.
I don't know how that works.
So I've been here 30 years, and in my 30 years and all of the pipelines and projects that we've done, we've never had eminent domain. And we will come to the board in future board meetings and talk with you about our strategy for acquiring property and do everything we can to keep from having to go that route.
I know you will.
Yep.
Director Henderson, did you have a question?
I do. So this contract amount in the resolution appears to be for all 5 tasks. Oh, wow, you're way too far.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, or all 7 tasks. So task 1, it appears that we've already approved something on page number 9. So how much have we already approved of that $8 million in that original?
None of it. That original approval was for preliminary engineering work. And so this is all new. None of this includes that. That work has already been done. It was, I think, 2.7 million. One of the things with Walker Partners is they didn't use it all. And we're very appreciative of our consultants that watch their costs, and they've been very good about that. I think we ended up a few $100,000 under budget on that effort. But this was a separate approval. We could have gotten to the end of this and, decided to do something else or, had another project, but we got to the end of this effort, and what we're back here today for is to take the next step.
So I guess my confusion is look at this in the wording of this resolution again, because what I read in here, it says for phase 1 of the Belton Stillhouse Lake system, and then what we're about to approve also includes a phase 1.
Yeah, it could be semantics. I think the phase 1 language here was drafted from the request for qualifications. So when we went out to hire the engineers originally for this project, we had it divided into 3 phases. 1 was this preliminary engineering. 2 was basically all of the engineering and design work that we're seeking approval for today. And then the last phase was construction. So the terminology that's probably what the confusion is there. This phase 1 here was from the 2018 request for qualifications.
Okay,
Director
so we're
Ambrell?
approving phase 2.
Yes.
And all of the tasks associated.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So how much of this of this phase or these different tasks, how much of that will be done by Walker Partners versus how much of that's going to be subcontracted out to other engineering or design people or people outside of them?
I don't know the answer to that, but Mandy or Aaron, could y'all address that question roughly?
Aaron, can you come up front, please? Only because you look like Matthew McConaughey and we're on YouTube. Sorry.
That's a good question. It's a large and complex project, so we have a pretty large team ranging.
So, will you tell me who you are? Because
I'm sorry.
To me, you're a guy that just got out of the audience.
My
Tell
name
me
is
who you are.
my name is Aaron Archer. I'm with Walker Partners. I'm the project manager, and I served as a project manager on phase 1 as well. So it's a large and it's a complex project. We've got anywhere from geotech services to land acquisition, public involvement. I have a large team that it does include a lot of sub-consultants for specialty services. Right now, the prime contract with Walker Partners is about 50% Walker Partners and about 50% sub-consultants.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, David,
Director, let Director Embro ask his question. That might help steer some more conversation on what you're trying to get to.
maybe. Okay.
Can we go back to the
Previous slide.
previous slide here? Sounds like a wonderful project, complex project, a lot of pieces. And as she was mentioning earlier, there's been a phase already, preliminary engineering phase has been completed to $2.something million. And when I'm looking at this, I just have a hard time understanding, and maybe you guys can help us justify why the amount is so high. And keep in mind, this doesn't even include a later authorization for construction services that we're going to be hit with later on. So we're looking at 20% of the construction costs, and it's typically 10%. So just, can you guys help us understand how, and I just want to make sure we're being good steward of the BRA dollars, and engineering firms are, listen, I have an engineering firm, so I'm not trying to over criticize here, but I just want to make sure we're being good stewards.
Sure, Director Embro, and I appreciate the question. And as a general rule of thumb, and correct me where you disagree, you're looking at somewhere between 8 and 12, 13% for engineering design services for total opinion of probable construction cost. And that's what we think is represented in line 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that gets us to about 11% of probable construction cost. Because of the complexity of the project, the permitting, the work with the Corps, acquiring the land services, everything from, I guess, 4, 5, let me say that again. Engineering and design is 1, 2, 3. Everything else is 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all of it in totality, yes, is 20%. But in our opinion, the rule of thumb that we're trying to follow and stay around that 10% is task 1, 2, and 3, and that actually is right at 11%. Right?
Well, you've already done the preliminary engineering too. That's that
correct.
should be part of this number. The $2 million should be part of that overall number, and then you're asking another 10% contingency on top of that. So I'm just really, for me, I think it's a lot to ask for a design project that's $100 million construction cost.
The contingency, if you guys don't want the contingency, we can take that out. So, that's up to y'all. The rest of these costs, we've actually done some research here and looked at traditional ranges, and these are kind of in line with what we've seen. And like David said, I think the biggest things are some of these things down here, like public involvement, that's not an engineering cost. And then, the permitting work, kind of the same thing. So, yeah, the total is 20, but like David said, even if you add the preliminary engineering to that number, maybe it bumps it up to 9% or something like that. So I get where you're coming from, but from the research that we've done, we're within kind of industry standards here.
Thank you.
Okay, Jen, you want to circle back?
Yeah, we didn't quite get to my question on this one. So I see that there's going to be ultimately 3 phases to this. What I don't understand is, okay, so the RFP first was all 3 phases or was just 1 phase? Why did we not go back out with an RFP for phase 2 right now? I just want to make sure that
Because we wanted to stay consistent with the engineer that we were using and not pay somebody else to come in and look over and redo phase 1.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I get that.
If we wouldn't have been satisfied with phase 1, we could have gone back out and started over again.
Yeah,
But this is so complex and there's so many different routes. And when we get to permitting and public involvement, the Corps is going to require that we have all of these different alternative methods. That's the reason that preliminary costs so much, and that we've done what we've done. This is different than just building any one structure on your own property. Because of what we're going to have to do to get this permitted, we had to do more. So that's why it was consistent for us to stay with our engineer through the entire process if we could. And these guys have done an outstanding job.
I appreciate that. I
Okay.
really do. My question, you got right at the heart of it, was did we have everything in that first one? So now I think, if I remember right, when we were talking about phase 1, it was, okay, this is phase 1. Now we're going to come back with phase 2. And then we'll see phase 3 in 4 years or so. That's the expectation?
Yes, I've got the request for qualifications, and another point, on why we didn't go back out is, we have to select engineers based on qualifications, not fee. And so when we selected them originally, the preliminary engineering was kind of the testing ground, and like David said, they've done an outstanding job, and they're actually almost through building something bigger than this for our neighbors down south. And so we've got word of mouth feedback from those guys as well. But when we selected them, I'll read this as directly from the request for proposals. It said the selected firm will be retained to provide engineering services for up to 3 project phases: preliminary engineering, final design and contractor procurement, and construction, with contracting for preliminary engineering separate from the remaining phases. And so then, we've got a more detailed scope below that for those 3 phases. And this was from the 2018 request for qualifications.
Okay. I appreciate that. You just answered my question and all of that.
Okay.
And I really do appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Brad. Any other questions? Yes, Director Jimenez.
Thank you for all the information. My only question would be, since this is a drought preparedness project and we're having all the water attention coming down from Texas, how does it help, or are we duplicating any of it?
So no, the drought preparedness project for us is that at Stillhouse Hollow, without this pipeline, I'm going to go back to 2005 projection. So these lines up here are about what that lake can reliably supply without this pipeline. You see the demand we've had, we're right about here right now. Once we get up to here, this is when our Williamson County customers kind of max out their contracts. But those other 20-something customers that rely on water at Stillhouse Hollow, they need this supplement, because if they grow higher than projected, and they will, back here when we were seeing this kind of growth is different than where we're going to see in the future with all the growth coming. So I think we're going to see this red line here rise more than that up here. And so that's the drought preparedness. Those folks at Stillhouse Hollow, when we have really dry years, they won't have enough water, and we'll have to be very extreme with our drought contingency plan in terms of curtailments, versus with this project, we'll be able to supplement their supply from Lake Belton.
All right, thank you, Brad.
Director Ember has one more comment.
Brad, thanks for clarifying the, can you go back to that one screen? For me, I think your justification is fine. I don't see the need for that 10% BRA contingency with everything else that we have going on there. So that would be my recommendation, is to remove that.
And presiding officer, we have no problem doing that.
We'll move forward with the agenda item. There's a question over here.
My understanding of the contingency plan has to do with rising costs that you can't foresee between now and the time you start building?
It could be that, or it could be as simple as we find something that we couldn't have anticipated, and instead of waiting for the next board cycle, it allows me to renegotiate and do that. But again, we have a lot of money in this project, and if it makes the board feel more confident that we take that out, I have zero problems taking that out and then coming back to the board if we need more money to justify it.
Director.
You need to move quickly with things going on in California, Carolina. I think costs will be going up high. I think the quicker you get your project, the better off you'll be.
100%.
Director Taylor had a question.
More of a comment. David, if you, I'm not telling you don't know what you're doing, but you don't want to take out the entire contingency. It just, it's a long-term project that's got a lot of moving pieces. You at least need 5% in there, but you can't go to zero. If you're going to be coming back to the board, I mean, and you need some flexibility. I'd say if the board wants to change it, that's fine, but I would highly recommend you not go below 5%.
You know, I don't have a problem whichever way they go. My only thing is, typically when you go to the level of effort at this detail, you have a pretty good number. There's no need for a contingency, typically. But
Okay, Director Wellen.
My question deals with the interaction between Task 2 and Task 5. You're talking about looking at land acquisition strategies and geotechnical borings. And what's the idea or the plan to do those borings on land that has not been acquired yet, and how that might influence your acquisition strategy and vice versa? You talk about contingency and trying to get a design put together. What's the relationship between those two to make sure that we're doing the right thing? Because part of acquisition strategy is alternate routes because of a problem that may come up with a landowner, and if we move here or there, we can save a lot of money, for example. And so if you already done all your borings down a route, and then secondly, how do you gain access to land you don't own yet to do borings? So if this is a package deal, kind of what's the sequence there?
Right.
And I think my question deals with this issue of contingency and risk tied to the project, and how would you address that?
So we did a little bit of that in the preliminary engineering effort. I think we looked at 7 different pipeline routes, and we looked at them from all angles. And I'm going to step away and let Aaron backfill here in terms of the details of that analysis. But for those of you that may be familiar with that area, there's not a good way to get across there. There's a lot of development, and this route that we've identified ultimately is really the only clean route, without subdivisions and things that you would probably just have to tunnel under, which would be very expensive. And so we looked at every possible factor that could be considered in that alternatives analysis, including the desktop geotech work. In terms of the borings, we are going to have to obtain rights of entry and get out there to confirm what was looked at in the preliminary engineering effort. We're doing that right now on our pipeline from East Williamson County. I don't know if y'all remember that project, but we're building a new pipeline there. And so we're going to have to do some boring work to confirm what we identified out there. And with that, Aaron, I'll let you jump in here and fill in any details.
Yes, thank you, Director. That's a very good question. Those two tasks do tie hand in hand. And the way we see that moving forward is that our land team will be working out ahead of our engineering team to establish a right of entry on those properties that we need to get access to. The studies we might need to perform on private property through a right of entry before an acquisition would include just the surveying work itself. It could include, as you pointed out, the geotechnical investigation or elements of it. And then we will have significant environmental studies as well to clear that alignment. So all of those tasks couldn't occur on private property until we have a signed right of entry to kick that process off. Ultimately, that would move forward into the land acquisition process itself, developing a meets and bounds description, entering negotiation with that property owner. But the right of entry is the first step, and that effort for right of entries is under Task 5.
Thank you very much for your response. We have one more question, and then I'm going to move on.
You're gonna have to do a lot of boring through rock, correct? Because a lot of limestone is on the western side of 35, where the two lakes are. If you go to the eastern side, pretty much just on the other side of 35, you have all the black dirt. So, I mean, what they don't understand is what you're gonna have to go through.
Yes,
To get
Director.
from one lake to the other, it's not gonna be easy.
It's all rock. It'll start with the shaft at Belton Lake where the pump station will be is going to be a 200-foot deep shaft through rock. And then the pipeline that will carry the water down to Stillhouse will be excavated in rock as well. So we're anticipating all rock with an extensive geotechnical investigation to characterize that rock so that the contractor knows the basis of which they need to develop their bids.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your questions. I think it has helped us to understand the complexity of the project. Brad, thank you for you and your team. I want the board to just recognize before he reads the resolution that we're directing our general manager and CEO to negotiate the project, whether it's 10% or 5%. David, we expect that you do the due diligence and make sure that your team stays on budget for the project. And I feel confident that you'll do that. So please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a professional services contract with Walker Partners, LLC, for all activities associated with the permitting, engineering, design, property right-of-way, acquisition services, and bid phase services for construction of a raw water pump station, transfer pipeline, and outlet structure needed to transfer water from Belton Lake to Stillhouse Hollow Lake in an amount not to exceed $27,225,300.
We've all heard the reading of the resolution. Director Huber makes a motion. I make a second. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Abstain.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
All right. We're going to just take a 15-minute break and then come back and review the agenda item number 8. So 15 minutes and we'll come back and do that. Thank y'all. And possible action on authorization to finalize and execute the interlocal and contractual agreement with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department by Destiny Rush Huber as staff counsel, and we have a resolution. Did anybody have any questions before we read that resolution? All right.
Yeah, we fixed paragraph 2 and 4, so if y'all just want to take a minute, let me know what you think.
Okay, please read the resolution.
Whereas, in 2011, BRA entered into a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, TPWD, where BRA pledged to dedicate water from BRA's System Operations Permit. This MOU was subsequently amended in 2014, requiring that the dedication be incorporated into the first update of BRA's Water Management Plan, WMP. Whereas BA offered and TPWD has accepted a dedication of 6,035 acre-feet per year for in-stream uses along the main stem of the Brazos River, downstream of Possum Kingdom Lake to the Gulf of America in the form of a contractual agreement. Whereas BRA and TPWD Legal Services are in the process of completing both the contractual agreement and the interlocal that memorializes this dedication. Due to project deadlines, these documents must be finalized and executed by March 2025. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to finalize and execute an interlocal and contractual agreement that dedicates 6,035 acre-feet of water to Texas Parks and Wildlife Department per year for in-stream uses along the main stem of the Brazos River downstream of Possum Kingdom Lake to the Gulf of America.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Ruiz, a second by Director Taylor. Please poll the board.
Presiding officer, can I ask a question? I hate to do this. Do we really have a Gulf of America?
Yes.
He signed the executive.
That was my
order.
comment.
Hold on just a second. What was the answer?
Yeah, he signed the executive order. The Department of Interior has 30 days
Okay.
from that signing, so February 10th to change all the maps.
Okay, thank you.
Department of Interior website, it says Gulf of America.
Yep.
That's right.
It does.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
We're ahead of schedule.
All right. Motion was made by Director Ruiz, a second by Director Taylor. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
The Gulf of America, yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Jimenez? Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Imbro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
All right, that seems to be all of our agenda items. Do I hear a motion to, Director Savage is quick to say he's ready to end this meeting, and Director Henderson is second. All in favor? Everybody have a safe travel home, and we adjourn at 12:22 p.m. Thank you, everybody.